It's Rob!
Tony!
We're in gaming!
And that's you!
Hello inmates and welcome back to the Inn. I'm Rob, of course, our Warshack if you want to call me by my in-game name. And today we're going to be going over the top 10 best neutral legendaries as of now. Obviously with the old gods coming out, the meta has shifted quite a bit. So what was the best legendaries, a couple months ago may not in fact be the best legendaries that are out now. So with that, along with this video, we're also going to be posting top 10 worst neutral legendaries along with top 10 best and worst class-specific legendaries. So there's actually a couple. This is going to be a small little series we got going on here. So without further ado, let's get into number 10 on our list, and that is Yogg-Saron. Keep in mind that because we can only pick 10, or we only decided to pick 10 of the neutral legendaries, that all of these neutral legendaries are really good. I wouldn't say our number one legendary that we have up there is way better than Yogg-Saron, or the vice versa. These are like the legendaries these neutral legendaries are what you're going to see most on ladder, would be these guys. And first is Yogg-Saron. This guy's Battlecry. Cast a random spell for each spell you've cast this game. If you play Hearthstone at all, you probably ran into Yogg-Saron, and he either destroyed your opponent when your opponent played him, and it didn't work out too well for him, or he totally reversed the game on you, and what you thought was an easy win has now turned into Yogg-Saron madness, and he somehow cleared your board. It played Call the Wild for him. It played a bunch of secrets. It healed him. It did damage to you, and he drew cards. So Yogg-Saron is definitely an RNG master race card, and it's seen its way into gimmick decks and competitive play, and it is one of those cards that has actually made its way into Tempo Mage, Druid, Warrior, Priest. It's just one of those cards that can basically fit in any deck as long as there's, a decent amount of spells in it, and he can sway games. He's the big red button of the, oh shit, I'm about to lose. What card can do it? If any card can, Yogg-Saron can, and that is why he is number 10 on our list. Heading down to the next card. I'm not going to explain this card a ton, as there's not a whole lot of text to him, and it's pretty straightforward. He's Karen Bloodhoof. He's a Death Rattle. Summon a 4/5 Bane Bloodhoof. He's a 6-drop, 4/5, so essentially you're getting an 8 attack, 10 HP card out of 6 mana, which is why he's good. Also in combination with N'Zoth, this guy comes back on the board, and it is huge for your opponent to get rid of. I wouldn't say this card. In vanilla Hearthstone, this card was very popular. It's one of the best legendaries. And then when TGT and GVG came out and whatnot, this guy kind of swayed in the back because of how fast the meta was. Secret Paladin absolutely destroyed the meta, and this guy was just too slow. And now that the meta has slowed down a tidbit and N'Zoth is out and gives a reason for people to play expensive Death Rattles, this guy has returned, and that is why he is number 9 on our list. Heading into number 8, we have the Bran Bronzebeard. This guy was seen a ton when Battlecry decks were popular, but now he's a little bit older now, so the decks aren't revolving around Bran, but because Cthulhu has a lot of Battlecries, Bran has found his new home in Cthulhu decks, and he's always basically been in Zulok decks, and we should probably talk about his stats. He's a 3-drop 2/4, your Battlecries trigger twice, so he fits well in any deck that obviously has a lot of battle cries, which, like I mentioned, were Cthulhu. Besides that, there's not really much to say about him besides the fact that if he sits on the field for longer than, I want to say, 1 or 2 turns, your opponent is going to be able to get too much value from him. So whether they're playing Dark Peddlers, Azure Drakes, or cards that just buff themselves through their own battle cry like Twilight Drake, he gives cards the ability to obtain insane value. So that is why he is on number 8 on our list. So heading down, we got, ooh, buddy boy, I'm gonna be rich. Reno Jackson, a 6-drop, 4/6 Battlecry. If your deck contains no more than 1 of any card, fully heal your hero. So when me and Tony were actually going over this card for the first time, me and Tony was like, there is no way that any deck is gonna be a 1-of deck, that you would play a deck specifically for Reno Jackson. And I cannot tell you how wrong me and Tony were. It's hard to tell how good a card is before it comes out. It's actually, decks are built around them, and they're used, and there's synergies within other cards to make that card even better. So Reno Jackson, as we know, there's the Reno Warlock, there's Reno Mages, there's Reno Warriors. I would say Reno Warlock is probably one of the most popular of the Reno decks, and it's actually really good if you watch competitive Hearthstone at all. It is definitely one of the decks you're going to see a lot of, and it has made its way into competitive play and has stayed there for quite a few seasons now. So that's why Reno Jackson is on our list as one of the top legendaries. On top of that, you get him out of adventure mode, so you don't even have to necessarily craft him. You can just buy the adventure mode and you get this just a really, really good legendary that comes out of there. So heading into our next list is Justicar Trueheart. I actually added this as stats wise, and when you play Justicar, that's not why she's good. It's her battle cry that makes her amazing. And her battle cry says, replace your starting hero power with a better one. So over the course of the game, after you play Justicar Trueheart, you're getting basically double the value you would out of your battle cry. So whether you're playing warrior, instead of getting 2 armor, you're going to be able to get 4. Whether you're a priest, and instead of healing for 2, you're healing for 4. Or if, let's say, you're playing paladin, instead of creating 1 creature that's the Silverhand Recruit, which is a 1/1, you create 2 Silverhand Recruits, so which is basically a 2/2 on the field for just 2 mana. And it's just, this card, it gives you the ability to get an absurd amount of value from a necessarily free card, because you're only spending mana for your hero power. You're not using cards to deal with your opponent. You can actually use your hero power, which gives you the basic card advantage in the long run. So there's only a couple decks that Trueheart works with the most, but in essence, she in those decks, she's very crucial to having her. And those decks, of course, like I mentioned before, were warrior, priest, paladin, and then sometimes mage, druid, and shaman. So moving on to our next card, we've got Leroy Jenkins. Let me pull up him real quickly. There we go. So as we know, the iconic and the legendary Leroy Jenkins, I cannot believe this guy once cost 4 mana. Those days are over, but even with him costing 5 mana, he still is in the meta and is found in a variety of different decks, from playing Zoo to Face Hunter to Miracle Rogue. So he's a 5-drop, 6/2 charge battle cry, summon 2 1/1 whelps for your opponent. So obviously he's basically a game finisher. He's also found in Reno Lock, or I should say combo Reno Lock, where you're able to Leroy Jenkins, power overwhelming, make him a 10/2 with charge, and then you use Faceless Manipulator, which can turn into any card. So you turn that Faceless Manipulator into the Leroy Jenkins, and you're able to do 20 damage in 1 turn to your opponent, as long as you're able to Emperor Tharzan at least one of the combo pieces. So this guy, like I mentioned, basically your OTK in a sense. He's your final charge in to destroy your opponent, hopefully. Sometimes he's used to remove, let's say, a big taunt minion or maybe a big threat on the board. But 9 times out of 10, he's going to your face. And when you see Leroy Jenkins, you're most likely dead. So that is why he has made our list. He is found in a ton of different more aggressive style decks, and is just, he's Leroy Jenkins. You got to put him in there. All right, so we have our next one, which is going to be Twin Emperor Veclor. He is found in basically every single Cthulhu deck on ladder. He is a 7-drop 4/6, but that is not why he is on the list, is his stats. It's his ability to have taunt and battle cry. If your Cthulhu has at least 10 attacks, summon another Emperor. So you get in essentially an 8 attack, 12 HP creature for 7 mana. Both of them have taunt, and it's good that they're split up, because if your opponent uses Hex or something like that, they actually have to deal with both of them instead of him just being one huge creature. There's actually, 2 of them. Along with this, he's battle cry. So if you notice, we went over Brand Bronzebeard. This guy will synergize well with Twin Emperor. And you're going to be able to create 3 Twin Emperor Veclors, which is just a crazy amount of value. So unless you're playing against like a warrior who brawls at that point in time, Twin Emperor Veclor, if you got Brand on the board, is GG no re. Moving down to our our number 4 spot, we have Sylvanas the Windrunner. She's been around since the vanilla stages of Hearthstone. She's always been good, and I think will always remain good. Whether or not she's played a ton or not is going to depend on the meta and how fast or slow it is, but in essence, she is always going to be a good card. Nothing depends on her being good or not. Like the Black Knight, he relies on your opponents playing taunts. He's only good when your opponent plays taunts. While when you play Sylvanas the Windrunner and she's a 6-drop 5/5, her Death Arrow says take control of an enemy minion. Your opponent is always going to have to play around this. There's not a world in which you can play Sylvanas and your opponent's like, okay, that's fine, unless they're gonna win the next turn with maybe Leroy Jenkins. But Sylvanas the Windrunner, what makes her good is because your opponent has to play awkwardly, or maybe not utilize their turn to the fullest, because they have to deal with Sylvanas first, so she doesn't take one of their powerful minion from their side of the board. So they have to kind of like navigate around her to avoid, you obtaining value from her death rattle, unless they're gonna, they're like a face hunter and they're just gonna go face every turn. They don't care what creature you play. They don't care about anything other than just killing you and as fast as possible, which in my opinion is, you guys know what I think about aggro and zoo decks, but we're not going to get into that in this video. Our next one is going to be Ragnaros the Fire Lord. He's an 8/8/8 Can attack at the end of your turn, deal 8 damage to a random enemy. So, I mean, he just basically throws fireballs wherever Rag wants. If your opponent has, let's say, 1 minion on the field, it can either, at the end of your turn, the 8 damage is going to go to their 1 minion, or it's going to hit them directly. Rag is, I would have to say, Rag has a sizable amount of RNG, but because he costs 8 mana, I think it's okay. Dealing 8 damage to a random target, you paid 8 mana to summon him, he can't actually attack. I think that's a fair amount of RNG. Cards like Yogg, on the other hand, I think it's just too much RNG because it's just, there's no skill involved with Yogg. But I mean, you did pay 10 mana for Yogg, but you get a lot more than just throwing 8 damage at something. But that's beside the point. Rag was good in vanilla vanilla Hearthstone. He was played in almost every single deck, and when GVG and TGT came out, he kind of rotated out, and then he somehow rotated back in and found his way into Secret Paladin, and now he's rotated back in because, again, the meta has slowed down. Big Game Hunter isn't around, or he is around, just not as much anymore, so Ragnaros the Firelord can actually sit on the field and do what Rag does best, and that's throw giant fireballs wherever he wants. And if you're me, then he throws them at 1/1 imps from a zoo deck. But if you're anybody else, most of the time he does what he's supposed to do and win you games. That was actually second on our list. Windrunner was 3. My bad, guys. I got the ordering messed up. I actually counted my words of top 10 neutral legendaries, like the title of my little thing here, as a card. Let's just say it's really early in the morning. So our last legendary that we're going to be going over that I think is he's just absolutely insane. If you play him and you can get the value from him, he will win so many games, and that is N'Zoth the Corruptor. He's a 10-drop 5/7. So again, like Reno Jackson, when we first went over N'Zoth, I actually thought this card was horrible. I said this card, I didn't say he's horrible, I said he's just too slow. You know, you have to run a decent amount of death rattles to, you know, be able to get value from him. You can't do anything else when you play this guy. You're giving your turn just to summon what was once dead. He's only a 5/7 in stats, and it's just not worth it. There's better cards. And at the time there was Mysterious Challenger, and you could run, you know, Secret Paladin and just go face and just ignore everything, and the deck played itself. But now you actually, I think in the meta it's slowed down to the point, and they've removed enough cards where, you know, decks don't play themselves unless you're playing Zoo, which again, we're not going to get into that, even though I kind of am. So N'Zoth, definitely a great card. Summoned all Death Rattle minions that died this game. Essentially, you don't have to run a Death Rattle deck to get true value out of this guy. If he just brings back one Sylvanas, if he brings back a Tyrion, if he brings back a Bloodhoof, he only really has to bring back one decent Death Rattle minion for him to get his value back. Granted, he does cost 10 mana and you can't do anything else this turn, so if you're at low HP and your opponent has a ton of cards on the board, maybe playing N'Zoth that turn wasn't the best thing ever, but against any control matchup where your opponent isn't swarming the board and throwing up and just going face, most of the time N'Zoth is going to get you a sizable amount of value. You only have to, again, get one or two Death Rattles to make him really valuable, and he's definitely played a lot, whether it's the N'Zoth Paladin, there's the new N'Zoth Warrior, there's N'Zoth Warlock, there's N'Zoth Priest, there's N'Zoth Hunter. there's a variety of different decks this guy fits into, and I'm sure there's more to come with the cards that have yet to be released, and of course the next adventure mode and the next sets to come out. So N'Zoth, I think, will be a card that sticks around for a while. And this wraps up our top 10 neutral legendaries as of now. Keep in mind and look to see when this video is published. Obviously, 2 years from now, these cards won't be relevant, or maybe won't be relevant. Well, they won't, because they'll be cycled out with the new standard, or the new format. But either way, just keep in mind when this video is posted and be like, oh, this is so outdated. Just keep in mind, I know I'm going to get those comments in a year and a half from now, and it's going to trigger me. Looking out for a year and a half from now. That's a thought process. All right. So, as always, guys, I'm Warshack, of course, and happy whatever the hell date is.